1. Let me tell you about this sweet 1968 Ford LTD that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for just $2,900. This classic beauty is a solid old Ford with some serious potential. Now I've got to be real with you. This ride isn't perfect, but man, it's got character. The seller's been upfront about its condition, and I appreciate that honesty. It's a V8-powered rear-wheel drive sedan with an automatic transmission, which is exactly what you'd want from a classic American cruiser. Get this, it's only had 3 owners and has a mere 61,000 miles on the clock. That's practically nothing for a car of this vintage. The body looks to be in good shape, and it's even got the rare factory air conditioning option, which is pretty cool, pun intended. Now here's the deal. It runs, but it needs some love. The carb needs a rebuild, but the good news is, the seller's already got a new one ready to go. It just needs to be installed. The tires are in good shape with low miles, so that's one less thing to worry about. The AC isn't currently working and will need some attention, but hey, that's part of the fun with these old cars, right? The seller's being straight up about the emissions. It probably won't pass until the carb work is done. But here's the kicker. This baby qualifies for collector plates, which means you can kiss those pesky emissions tests goodbye forever. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This LTD needs some work, but for $2,900, you're getting a piece of American automotive history with tons of potential. If you've got the time and passion to give this old girl some TLC, you could have a real gem on your hands. It's being sold as is, so make sure you know what you're getting into. But man, what a cool project this could be. So, if you're looking for a classic Ford with good bones and don't mind getting your hands a little dirty, this 1968 LTD might just be the ride for you. Trust me, the satisfaction of cruising down the road in a fully restored piece of Detroit iron will be worth every minute you put into it. 2. Let me tell you about this awesome 1963 Ford Fairlane 500 that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $15,000. This isn't just any old Fairlane. This baby's got some serious history and style. First off, this car is a real showstopper. It was actually a theme show car from Frankie Fairlane's Lee Summit restaurant, so you know it's got that extra special something. The seller's not messing around when they say it's in great original condition, and I've got to say, I'm impressed. Under the hood, you've got a 260 V8 engine, which is paired with an automatic transmission. It's got power steering and air conditioning too, so you're not sacrificing comfort for style. And speaking of style, check out those Hoosier Pro Street tires. They give this classic a mean stance. Now let's talk about the condition. The seller's been upfront about the work they've done, and it's clear they've put some love into this Fairlane. We're looking at new shocks all around, a super solid frame, and excellent floors, rocker panels, quarter panels, and front fenders. That's music to any classic car lover's ears. The interior is original and in excellent condition. That's pretty rare for a car of this age. The exterior? Well, it's got a twist. The original blue paint is actually covered by a white wrap, making this Fairlane a real head-turner. And with 18-inch dual glass packs, it not only looks great, but sounds amazing too. They've replaced a bunch of important bits: new windshield, fuel pump, gas tank, master cylinder, wheel cylinders, and radiator. The side glass and back glass are original and in excellent shape. And get this, no sanding marks or scratches. That's some quality work right there. With only 62,000 miles on the odometer, this Fairlane has plenty of life left in it. It's got a clean title, and the seller's firm on the $15,000 price tag. Now that might seem steep to some, but considering the condition, the history, and all the work that's been done, it could be a fair deal for the right buyer. Look, I've got to be honest with you, this isn't a cheap project car. But if you're after a turnkey classic that's going to turn heads wherever you go, this 1963 Ford Fairlane 500 could be just the ticket. It's a piece of automotive history with a unique backstory, and it's ready to hit the road or the show circuit. If you've got the cash and you're looking for something special, this Fairlane deserves a serious look. 3. Let me tell you about this sweet 1978 Pontiac Grand Le Mans that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $8,500. This isn't just any old Pontiac. It's a well-preserved piece of automotive history that's begging for a new home. First off, let's talk about the condition. The seller's being straight up about this car, and I appreciate that honesty. They're calling it excellent, and from what I can see, they're not far off the mark. This Gran Le Mans has only 59,000 original miles on the clock. That's practically nothing for a car of this vintage. Under the hood, you've got a 5.0-liter, 305 CID V8 motor with a 2-barrel carburetor. It's all original, folks. And get this, the seller says it's in great driving condition with no mechanical problems. That's music to any classic car lover's ears. Now, let's talk about that interior. The seller describes it as a pistachio green leather in pristine condition. No tears, no cracks. That's pretty impressive for a car that's over 40 years old. The AC works, the radio works. It's like stepping back in time to 1978. All right, I've got to be real with you about the exterior. The seller admits it's starting to show its age, mainly due to sun exposure. But hey, that's part of the charm with these old cars, right? A little patina never hurt anybody. Here's the kicker. This Gran Le Mans has only had 2 owners. The first owner garage kept it and only drove it on weekends for many years. Talk about babied. The current owner has kept up with regular maintenance and service, so you know it's been well cared for. And here's a bonus. It's already smogged and registered until June 2025. That's one less headache for the new owner to deal with. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. $8,500 isn't chump change. But for a well-maintained, low-mileage classic, with a clean title and everything in working order, that could be a fair deal for the right buyer. If you're in the market for a classic Pontiac that's ready to hit the road, this 1978 Gran Le Mans deserves a serious look. It's got character, it's got style, and with a little TLC on the exterior, it could be a real showstopper. Plus, imagine cruising down the highway in this beauty, AC blasting, radio playing your favorite tunes. That's what the classic car life is all about. So, if you've got the cash and you're looking for a slice of 70s automotive goodness, this Gran Le Mans might just be the ride for you. It's a chance to own a piece of Pontiac history that's been loved and cared for its entire life. Now that's something special. Let me tell you about this sweet 1983 Pontiac Trans Am that's currently up for grabs on Craigslist for $6,500. This isn't just any old TA, it's a piece of 80s muscle car history that's begging for a new home. Now, I've got to be straight with you. This isn't a pristine showroom condition car, but it's got a lot going for it. The seller's being upfront about its condition, calling it good, and I appreciate that honesty. With 137,181 miles on the clock, it's clear this Trans Am has seen its fair share of road. But that just means it's got stories to tell. Let's talk about what makes this TA special. It's rocking the WS7 package option, which is a nice touch for collectors. Under the hood, you've got the original 305 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carb. That's pure 80s muscle right there. The transmission has been upgraded to a 1984 4-speed auto, which is a nice little performance boost. The seller mentions that it's mostly original and unrestored, which is great if you're looking for a project car with good bones. They've made a few upgrades, like swapping in some 15-inch rims from a 1985 model, but everything else is either original or close to it. Now, I've got to be honest. With a car this age, you're probably looking at some work to get it into top shape. The white paint might need some love, and there could be some typical wear and tear issues to address. But hey, that's part of the fun with these old muscle cars, right? At $6,500, this Trans Am could be a solid deal for the right buyer. It's got a clean title, which is always a plus. If you're looking for a project car with some serious 80s flair, or if you're a Pontiac enthusiast looking to relive the glory days of the Trans Am, this could be the ride for you. Just imagine cruising down the highway in this beauty, T-tops off, wind in your hair, feeling like you're in a real-life Knight Rider episode. That's what owning a classic Trans Am is all about. So, if you've got the cash and you're not afraid of a little elbow grease, this 1983 Pontiac Trans Am deserves a serious look. It's a chance to own a piece of automotive history that's been loved and driven. With some TLC, you could have a real head-turner on your hands. Remember, They don't make them like this anymore. 5. Alright, car enthusiasts, gather round because I've got something special to share with you today. I've just come across a 1960 Plymouth Valiant listed on Craigslist, and let me tell you, it's a real gem. This classic 4-door sedan is up for grabs at $12,000 and it's got a story to tell. First things first, let's talk about the looks. This Valiant is sporting a striking red and white color scheme, both inside and out. It's the kind of car that'll transport you right back to the golden age of American automobiles. The seller claims it's in excellent condition, and based on the description, it sounds like they've put some real love into this vehicle. Now, I know what you're thinking. The odometer reads 267,700, 253 miles. That's a lot of road under its wheels, no doubt about it. But here's the kicker. This Valiant has been restored to stock and is described as being in immaculate condition. It's not often you find a car of this vintage that's been so well maintained. Under the hood, you'll find the classic 225 cubic inch slant 6 engine. This power plant is paired with a 3-speed automatic transmission, driving the rear wheels just like nature intended. It's a combination that defined an era of American motoring. The seller is offering a clean title, which is always a plus when dealing with classic cars. It means you're likely to avoid any nasty surprises when it comes to paperwork. They're also inviting potential buyers to arrange a viewing, which I'd highly recommend. With a car of this age, you'll want to see it in person, hear it run, and maybe even take it for a spin if possible. Now, I want to be straight with you all. This car is being sold as is, which means you'll want to give it a thorough inspection before making any decisions. While the seller describes it as immaculate, it's always wise to verify the condition yourself when dealing with a vehicle of this age. In conclusion, if you're in the market for a piece of automotive history, this 1960 Plymouth Valiant could be just the ticket. It's got character, style, and has clearly been cared for. Yes, it's got high mileage, but with the restoration work that's been done, this could be a fantastic addition to any classic car collection. Just imagine cruising down the street in this beauty, turning heads and sparking conversations wherever you go. It's not just a car, it's a time machine on wheels. 6. We're diving into a real gem I found on Craigslist, a 1976 Buick Century Coupe that's caught my eye. This classic American beauty is up for grabs at $15,000, and let me tell you, it's got some stories to tell. First off, let's talk about what we're looking at here. This Century is rocking a vibrant red paint job that's sure to turn heads wherever it goes. Under the hood, you've got a beefy 8-cylinder engine, which was the heart and soul of American muscle back in the day. With only 48,000 miles on the odometer, this Buick has seen surprisingly little action for its age. Now, the seller describes the car as being in good condition overall, and I'm inclined to believe them. They mention that there are no mechanical issues, and the engine, transmission, and bodywork are all straight and running. That's great news for anyone looking to pick up a classic that doesn't need a complete overhaul. But let's be real here. No car from the 70s is going to be perfect, and this Buick is no exception. The seller, who's only the second owner, is upfront about a few minor issues. There's a slow leak in the driver's side tire, possibly due to a cracked rim. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something you'll want to address. They also mention that the interior could use some updating, which is pretty common for cars of this vintage. One thing to keep in mind is that this Century has been sitting for 2 years, so the registration isn't current. You'll need to factor in the cost of getting it road legal again. The good news is that the seller has a clean title and the pink slip in hand, so there shouldn't be any nasty surprises in the paperwork department. Look, I'm not here to oversell this car. It's not a showroom perfect restoration, and it's not trying to be. What we've got here is a solid starting point for someone who wants to continue the project. It's a chance to own a piece of American automotive history that's still in good shape and doesn't need a complete overhaul. If you're in the market for a classic Buick that you can drive and enjoy while gradually bringing it back to its former glory, this 1976 Century could be right up your alley. It's got potential, it's got character, and with a little TLC, it could be a real stunner. Just remember, you're not just buying a car, you're taking on a piece of history. So, Are you ready to continue this Buick's journey? 7. I've got a real interesting find for you today from Craigslist. A 1973 Ford Gran Torino that's currently up for grabs at $6,000. Now, I'm going to give it to you straight, because that's what we're all about here. This Gran Torino is a piece of American muscle car history, no doubt about it. It's sporting a 351 Windsor V8 under the hood, paired with an automatic transmission, and its rear-wheel drive, just as the muscle car gods intended. The odometer shows 95,000 miles, which isn't too shabby for a car pushing 50 years old. Now let's talk condition. The seller describes it as fair, and I think that's a pretty honest assessment. They mention it's had an older restoration, which means it's been shown some love in the past, but it's not a fresh rebuild. The good news is that it shows well, according to the seller. It's got a brown paint job, which might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's certainly period correct. Here's the important part. The seller says it runs, drives, and stops. That's crucial information for any classic car buyer. You're not looking at a non-runner that needs to be trailered home and completely rebuilt. This Torino is a driver, and that's a big plus in my book. The interior is described as being in great condition, which is often a weak point in cars of this age. If that's accurate, it's a definite selling point. The car also comes with air conditioning, which is a nice feature to have, especially in a classic. Now I've got to be upfront with you. The fair condition rating suggests this isn't a show-quality car. It's likely got some wear and tear, maybe some rust issues that are common with cars of this era. The older restoration might be showing its age in places. But for $6,000, you're not expecting perfection, right? One thing to note is that this Gran Torino is located in Thunder Bay, Ontario. That means if you're not in the area, you'll need to factor in transportation costs or a road trip to check it out and bring it home. In conclusion, what we've got here is a classic American muscle car with a lot of potential. It's not perfect, but it runs and drives, which is a great starting point. At $6,000, it could be a fun project car or a cool daily driver with some additional work. Just remember, with any classic car purchase, especially one described as in fair condition, it's crucial to see it in person and maybe get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. But if you're looking for an affordable entry into the world of classic muscle cars, this '73 Gran Torino might just be your ticket to ride. 8. I've got an interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. We're looking at a 1955 Mercury Hardtop that's currently on the market for $5,500. Now, let me be straight with you. This isn't a show-ready classic, but it's got potential for the right person. Let's dive into what we're dealing with here. This Mercury is definitely a project car, and the seller is upfront about that. It's got a bit of an identity crisis with a 1956 Mercury front bumper, which might be a plus or a minus depending on your perspective. Under the hood, you'll find a 302 motor paired with a C4 transmission, which the seller describes as good. That's a solid powertrain combo, but here's the kicker. It doesn't currently run. The seller mentions it needs wiring work, so you're looking at some electrical gremlins to sort out. The odometer shows 6,790 miles, but given the age and condition of the car, I'd take that with a grain of salt. It's likely been around the clock at least once. On the bright side, it comes with a clean Arizona title, which usually means less rust to deal with compared to cars from wetter climates. Now, let's talk about the body and interior. The seller describes it as a pretty solid car, with solid floors, which is good news. However, it's missing some moldings, so you'll need to hunt those down if you want to restore it to original spec. The interior needs to be redone entirely, so factor that into your budget if you're thinking about taking this project on. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This Mercury needs a lot of work. It's not running. It needs wiring. The interior is shot, and it's missing some exterior bits. But for $5,500, you're getting a piece of 1950s automotive history with a clean title and a solid foundation. The 302 C4 combo is a plus if you're not dead set on originality, and could make for a fun cruiser once you get it sorted. This is the kind of project that could be a great father-son bonding experience, a retirement project, or just a fun weekend warrior build. It's not for the faint of heart or the thin of wallet. But if you've got the skills, time, and resources, this 1955 Mercury Hardtop could be transformed into something really special. Remember, with project cars like this, always budget more time and money than you initially think you'll need. But if you're up for the challenge, this Mercury could be your ticket to the world of classic car ownership. Just be prepared for a journey, not a quick flip. So, what do you say? Ready to bring this piece of automotive history back to life? 9. We're diving into a real gem I spotted on Craigslist, a 1970 Plymouth Duster that's up for grabs at $15,000. Now let me give you the lowdown on this classic muscle car, and I promise to keep it real. First off, we're looking at a coupe body style with a custom paint job. The sellers listed it in good condition, which is promising. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Under the hood, we've got a small block 318 V8 engine paired with an automatic transmission. A solid combo for cruising and some decent power when you need it. Now, here's where things get a bit tricky. The odometer shows 20,000 miles, but hold your horses. The seller mentions the odometer is broken. So, we're in the dark about the true mileage on this baby. It's a common issue with classics, but it's something to keep in mind when considering the price. The Duster's got rear-wheel drive, as any proper muscle car should, and it's running on good old gasoline. The title's clean, which is always a plus when dealing with older vehicles. Here's the thing though, the seller's description is pretty sparse. They're asking folks to call for more information, which means there could be a lot more to this car's story. It could be a hidden gem with a ton of recent work done, or it might need some TLC. Without more details, it's hard to say for sure. Look, I'm not here to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. This Duster sounds like it could be a cool piece of American muscle car history, but with the limited info and the broken odometer, you'd definitely want to see it in person and maybe get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. At $15,000, it's not exactly cheap for a project car, but if it's as good as the seller claims, it could be a fair price for a running, driving piece of nostalgia. Just remember, with any classic car, especially one with limited information, it's crucial to do your due diligence. So if you're in the market for a '70 Duster and you've got some cash to spend, this might be worth checking out. Just be prepared to ask a lot of questions and maybe get your hands a little dirty inspecting it. Who knows? This could be the start of your next great automotive adventure. What do you think, folks? Is this Duster calling your name, or would you keep on cruising? 10. I've got a real interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1969 Plymouth Fury 3 that's up for grabs at $6,700. Now, let me give it to you straight because that's what we're all about here. This Fury is a piece of late 60s American iron, sporting a 318 V8 paired with a 727 automatic transmission. The seller's been using it as a semi-regular driver, putting between 530 miles on it weekly or semi-weekly, which is good news. It means this isn't some garage queen that's been sitting for years. Now let's talk condition. The seller's honest about it being in fair condition, and that's refreshing. They mention there's some rust, mainly around the back window frame, so you'll want to check that out closely. The odometer shows 46,481 miles, but with a car this age, who knows if that's original? Here's where it gets interesting. This Fury's got some upgrades. We're looking at an Edelbrock intake and a 650 CFM 4-barrel carb, headers leading to an X-pipe and some neighbor-hater mufflers. The sellers even kept the original intake and carb setup, which is great if you're into originality. They've also thrown in an electronic distributor, upgraded alternator, and an Equus tachometer. The interior seems decent, no tears in the headliner, which is often a weak point in these old cars. The paint is white, which isn't the most exciting color, but it's classic. Now, I've got to be upfront. The seller mentions it could use a carb tune. That's not uncommon with aftermarket setups, but it's something you'll want to factor in. On the plus side, they say it starts easily, which is always good to hear with a classic. Look, this isn't a show car, it's not perfect, and it's not trying to be. What we've got here is a driver-quality Fury with some fun upgrades that'll turn heads and, according to the seller, set off car alarms. At $6,700, it's not the cheapest project car out there, but it's also not outrageous for a running, driving piece of American automotive history. If you're in the market for a classic cruiser that you can enjoy right away while gradually improving it, this '69 Fury might be worth a look. Just remember, with any classic car purchase, especially one described as in fair condition, it's crucial to see it in person and maybe get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. So, what do you think? Are you ready to cruise the streets in this piece of Plymouth history, or would you keep searching for that perfect classic? Remember, the seller's firm on meeting in person and cash is king. 11. I've got a real interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1984 Ford Mustang GT that's currently up for grabs at $5,500. Now let me give you the straight scoop on this piece of 80s muscle. First off, we're looking at a silver T-top coupe, which is already a cool combination for these Fox body Mustangs. The sellers listed it in good condition, and with only 40,000 miles on the odometer, that's promising. But let's dig a little deeper. Under the hood, we've got the classic 5.0-liter V8 that these GTs are known for. But here's where it gets interesting. The seller says the engine's been rebuilt recently, only about 5,000 miles ago. They've added some performance goodies too, including flat-top pistons and an aftermarket cam. That should give this pony a bit more kick than stock. The transmission is a C4 automatic, and the seller mentions it's been built up as well. For those of you who prefer rowing your own gears, this might be a deal breaker, but for cruising and straight-line speed, a built auto can be a lot of fun. Now, I've got to be honest with you. The seller admits this is a project car they don't have time for anymore. That usually means there's still work to be done. They don't go into detail about what exactly needs finishing, so you'll want to ask some questions and probably take a good look in person before making a decision. On the plus side, the seller says they have a video of the car running, which is always good to see with a project vehicle. It means you're not starting from scratch with a non-runner. Look, this Mustang isn't a perfect showroom condition collector's piece. It's a project car with some interesting mods and potential. At $5,500, it could be a good starting point for someone looking to dive into the world of Fox body Mustangs without breaking the bank. Just remember, with any project car, especially one from the 80s, you're likely to run into some surprises along the way. Budget for more time and money than you initially think you'll need. Interestingly, the seller mentions they'd consider trading for a 4Runner, so if you've got one of those sitting around, this could be your chance to switch gears, pun intended, to a classic American muscle car. So what do you think, folks? Are you ready to saddle up this silver Fox body pony and finish what the seller started? Or would you keep searching for that perfect 80s Mustang? Remember, always see a project car in person before making a decision. 12. I've got a real gem to share with you today from Craigslist. A 1979 Chevrolet Corvette that's up for grabs at $9,500. Now let me tell you, this isn't just any old vet we're talking about here. First off, we're dealing with a one-owner car, which is pretty rare for a vehicle that's over 4 decades old. The seller bought this beauty right off the showroom floor back in '79 and has been cruising in it ever since. That's a love story that spans 44 years, folks. Let's talk specs. This Corvette is packing a V8 engine, specifically the L82 motor, which was the high-performance option for that year. It's mated to a 4-speed manual transmission, so you'll be rowing your own gears in this bad boy. The seller also mentions a 400 turbo transmission, which is a bit confusing given the manual trans, so that might be worth clarifying. The odometer shows 95,000 miles, which averages out to about 2,160 miles a year. That's not bad at all for a car of this vintage. It's got T-tops, which are perfect for those sunny day cruises, and a posi-traction rear end to help put the power down. Now, the seller describes the condition as excellent, which is pretty impressive for a 44-year-old car. They mention that both the interior and exterior are original and well kept. However, they do admit it needs a little TLC to get it into tip-top shape, so keep that in mind. One big plus, This Corvette has never been in an accident. That's huge for maintaining value and structural integrity. The seller also says it runs great and has never left them stranded, which is always good to hear. Look, I'm not here to oversell this car. It's clearly been well loved. But at 44 years old, it's going to need some attention. The seller is upfront about it needing some TLC, so budget for that. But at $9,500, you're getting a piece of American sports car history with a great backstory. This Corvette could be perfect for someone looking to get into classic car ownership without breaking the bank. It sounds like it's in drive-at-home condition, but with room for improvement if you want to take it to the next level. So, what do you say, Corvette fans? Are you ready to become the second owner of this '79 beauty and continue its legacy? Remember, the seller's open to offers, so there might be some wiggle room on the price. Just be prepared for a bit of a bittersweet transaction. It's clear the seller has a lot of emotional attachment to this car. But hey, that's the kind of passion we love to see in the classic car world, right? 13. I've got an interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1968 Oldsmobile 88 that's currently up for grabs at $8,800. Now, let me give you the straight scoop on this piece of American automotive history. First off, we're looking at a Delmont 88 sedan, which was Oldsmobile's full-size offering back in the day. This big yellow beauty is packing the legendary Rocket 455 V8 engine under the hood. That's a lot of cubic inches, folks, and it was known for its smooth power delivery. Now here's where things get a bit tricky. The odometer shows 3,433 miles, but given the age of this car, it's almost certainly rolled over at least once, maybe twice. So take that number with a grain of salt. The seller is upfront about the car's condition, and I appreciate that honesty. They mention it's been sitting for some years, which is usually code for needs work. However, they also say it starts right up, which is a good sign. It means you're not dealing with a completely dead engine, at least. This Olds has an automatic transmission and rear-wheel drive, as you'd expect from a full-size American car of this era. The title is clean, which is always a plus when dealing with older vehicles. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is definitely a project car. The seller even says it would be a fun project car for the family. That means you should be prepared to put in some work. Sitting for years usually means you're looking at refreshing or replacing things like the fuel system, brakes, and probably some electrical components. At $8,800, it's not the cheapest project car out there, but it's also not outrageous for a running driving piece of late 60s Americana. These big Oldsmobiles aren't as common as some other classics from the era, so you definitely have something unique. Just remember, with any project car, especially one that's been sitting, budget for more time and money than you initially think you'll need. But if you're up for the challenge, this '68 Olds could be a rewarding project. Imagine cruising down the boulevard in this big yellow boat once you've got it sorted out. So what do you think, folks? Are you ready to take on this rocket-powered project? Or would you keep searching for that perfect classic? Remember, the car's in Albuquerque, NM, so factor in transportation costs if you're not local. 14. I've got a real interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1966 Ford Mustang that's currently up for grabs at $12,000. Now let me give you the straight scoop on this classic pony car. First off, we're looking at a coupe body style, which might not be as sought after as the fastback, but it's still a classic Mustang silhouette. The seller doesn't mention the original engine, but here's where things get interesting. This Stang has had some serious work done under the hood. We're talking about a completely new motor here, folks. The sellers put in some serious cash, they claim $10,000, into a fresh power plant. We're looking at roller rockers, aluminum heads, a new carb, headers, and manifold. That's a recipe for some serious horsepower, though they don't give us specific numbers. The transmission is automatic, but it's not your grandpa's slush box. We're talking about a built trans with a 2000 stall converter. That's set up for performance, no doubt about it. The rear end is a Ford 9-inch, which is known for its strength and is a popular choice for high-performance builds. The seller mentions new brakes and front-end work, which is good news for handling and safety. They claim it's mechanically sound, but here's the kicker. It's only got about 100 miles on this new setup. That means it's barely broken in, and you might need to budget for some fine-tuning as everything settles in. Now let's talk aesthetics. The seller mentions newer paint, but doesn't go into detail about the color or quality. It's something you'd want to check out in person. Here's the thing though, this Mustang is far from stock. If you're looking for an original numbers-matching classic, this isn't it. But if you want a '66 Mustang with modern performance upgrades, this could be right up your alley. At $12,000, you're paying for the upgrades more than the car itself. It's not cheap, but considering the amount of work and new parts that have gone into it, it might be a decent deal for the right buyer. Look, I'm not here to sell you on this car. It's clearly a project that someone has poured a lot of time and money into, and now they're moving on. It could be an absolute blast to drive, but it's also not a finished product. You'll want to see it in person, hear it run, and maybe even get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. So, what do you say, Mustang fans? Are you ready to saddle up this hot-rodded pony? Or would you rather keep searching for a more original classic? Remember, with any heavily modified classic car, it's crucial to do your due diligence. 15. I've got an interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1973 Buick Centurion convertible that's currently up for grabs at $12,500. Now let me give you the straight scoop on this piece of American automotive history because there's a lot to unpack here. First off, the Centurion is a less common model, which makes it an intriguing find for Buick fans. This one's a convertible, which adds to its appeal. Under the hood, you're looking at a big 455 cubic inch engine. That's 7.5 liters of pure American muscle. It's also got some nice features like air conditioning and tilt steering. Now here's where things get a bit complicated. The seller mentions that the car needs some TLC, which is often code for "it needs work." They claim the body and interior are great, which is a plus if accurate, especially for a convertible of this age. However, there's a big caveat here. This Centurion has a salvage title. The seller explains that the car was stolen at some point, which resulted in the branded title. This is a significant detail that will affect the car's value and potentially make it harder to insure or resell down the line. The odometer shows 44,000 miles, but given the car's history, it's hard to say if that's accurate. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The salvage title is a major consideration here. It doesn't necessarily mean the car is in bad shape, but it does add an element of risk and uncertainty. You'll want to get a thorough inspection and maybe even a professional appraisal before considering a purchase. At $12,500, it's not cheap for a car with a branded title, even if it is a relatively rare convertible. You're paying for the uniqueness of the model and the convertible top, but you need to weigh that against the title issues. This Centurion could be a great project for someone who understands the implications of a salvage title and is willing to put in some work. It's got potential to be a cool cruiser with that big 455 under the hood. But it's not for the faint of heart or those looking for a simple, straightforward classic car purchase. So, what do you think, folks? Are you ready to take on this Buick with a bit of a checkered past? Or would you keep searching for a clean title classic? Remember, always see a car in person and get a professional opinion before making a decision, especially with a situation like this. 16. I've got a real gem from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1959 Ford Fairlane Galaxy 500 that's up for grabs at $11,500. Now let me give you the straight scoop on this piece of late 50s Americana. First off, we're looking at a four-door sedan with some serious vintage charm. Under the hood, you'll find a V8 332 CI engine, which the seller notes is a rare option. That's a big plus for collectors who appreciate originality. The transmission is automatic, so you'll be cruising in style without having to row your own gears. Now let's talk condition. The seller describes it as good and says it's as close to original you will find in this good of shape. That's promising, but let's dig a little deeper. The odometer shows 121,146 miles, but the seller mentions it's rolled over, so we're looking at 221,146 miles or more. That's a lot of road under its wheels, but not unusual for a 60-plus-year-old car. The exterior is a two-tone teal green with white, which sounds pretty snazzy for a 50s ride. However, the seller is upfront about some issues. There are minor dents and scratches on the hood and right side, and someone keyed it at some point. They admit it could use a paint job, so factor that into your budget if you want it looking showroom fresh. On the bright side, the interior is described as being in great shape for the age, and the car has been garaged and covered for most of its life. That's good news for rust prevention and overall preservation. Mechanically, the seller says it runs great for the age, but notes that it's cold-blooded. That likely means it needs some time to warm up before it runs smoothly, not uncommon for older cars, but something to be aware of. Some nice touches include electric windshield wipers, a luxury in 1959, and a new radio. The seller also mentions it likes and drives great for the age, which is encouraging. Look, this isn't a perfect showroom condition collector's piece. It's got some dings, it needs paint, and it's got a lot of miles. But it sounds like a solid driver that's retained a lot of its original charm. At $11,500, you're getting a piece of Ford history that you can enjoy right away, while gradually improving it. Just remember, with any classic car purchase, especially one this old, it's crucial to see it in person, and maybe get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. And as the seller says, no lowball offers. They're not having it. So, what do you say, Ford fans? Are you ready to cruise the streets in this slice of 1959? Or would you keep searching for that perfect classic? 17. I've got an interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1980 Chevrolet El Camino that's currently up for grabs at $12,000. Now let me give you the straight scoop on this unique car-truck hybrid. First off, we're looking at a black El Camino with some serious upgrades under the hood. The sellers swapped in a 327 cubic inch V8, which is a nice step up from the original engine options. It's not just a stock 327 either. It's dressed with Sanderson ceramic headers and MagnaFlow mufflers. That should give this Elky a nice rumble and some extra ponies to boot. The transmission is a Turbo 400, which is known for its durability and is a popular choice for performance builds. Being rear-wheel drive, this El Camino should be a blast to drive with that upgraded powertrain. Now let's talk about condition. The seller describes it as good, and there are some positives here. They mention it's rust-free, which is a big deal for a 40-plus-year-old vehicle. The front end has been completely redone with TRW parts, powder-coated A-arms, and energy suspensions bushings. That's a lot of new hardware that should make for a tight, responsive ride. However, it's not all roses. The seller is upfront about a couple of issues. The AC compressor needs replacing, so factor that in if you want to stay cool while cruising. There's also some minor damage to the rear quarter panel that needs attention. The odometer shows 60,000 miles, but the seller notes it's rolled over, so we're looking at 160,000 miles or more on this chassis. That's not necessarily a deal breaker for a well-maintained vehicle, but it's something to keep in mind. Look, this isn't a pristine original El Camino. It's been modified and has some needs. But for someone looking for a performance-oriented El Camino that's had some serious work done, this could be a great starting point. The rust-free body and upgraded suspension are big pluses. At $12,000, you're paying for the upgrades more than the base vehicle. It's not cheap, but considering the work that's gone into it, it might be a decent deal for the right buyer. Just remember, with any modified classic, you'll want to see it in person, hear it run, and maybe even get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. So, what do you say, El Camino fans? Are you ready to cruise in this beefed-up 80 Elky? Or would you rather keep searching for a more original example? Remember, always factor in the cost of addressing those known issues when considering the price. 18. I've got a real piece of automotive history to share with you today from Craigslist. A 1941 Cadillac Fleetwood that's currently up for grabs at $14,000. Now, let me give you the straight scoop on this pre-war luxury machine. First off, we're looking at a four-door sedan from an era when Cadillac was the undisputed king of American luxury cars. This Fleetwood model would have been top of the line back in its day, the kind of car that turned heads wherever it went. It's sporting a blue paint job, which, if original, would be quite a rare sight. Under the hood, you've got an 8-cylinder engine, which was Cadillac's bread and butter in those days. Interestingly, it's paired with a manual transmission, which isn't something you see every day in a Cadillac of this vintage. Now let's talk condition. The seller describes it as fair, and we've got to take that at face value. This isn't a pristine showroom quality restoration we're dealing with here. It's an 82-year-old car that's seen its share of history. The odometer shows 23,200 miles, but on a car this old, that number could have rolled over multiple times. Here's the good news. The seller says it runs, drives, handles, and stops good. That's music to the ears of any classic car enthusiast. It means you're not looking at a non-runner that needs to be trailered home and completely rebuilt. This Cadillac is a driver, and that's a big plus in my book. The title is clean, which the seller refers to as a clear pink. That's California slang for a clean title. That's always a relief when dealing with older vehicles, as it means you shouldn't have any nasty surprises when it comes to paperwork. Look, I'm not here to oversell this car. At fair condition, you're likely looking at a vehicle that needs some TLC. The paint might be faded or chipped, the chrome might need attention, and the interior could probably use some work. But at $14,000 for a running, driving, pre-war Cadillac Fleetwood, you're not expecting perfection, right? This could be a great opportunity for someone who wants to get into the world of pre-war classics without breaking the bank. It's a car you could potentially drive and enjoy, while gradually restoring it to its former glory. So, what do you say, Cadillac fans? Are you ready to step back into 1941 with this Fleetwood sedan? Or would you rather keep searching for a more pristine example? Remember, with any classic car this old, it's crucial to see it in person, and maybe get a mechanic's opinion before pulling the trigger. 19. I've got an interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1970 Cadillac El Dorado that's currently up for grabs at $10,000. Now let me give you the straight scoop on this classic piece of American luxury. First off, we're looking at a black El Dorado, which is a color that really suits the bold, angular styling of these early 70s caddies. The seller describes it as being in good condition, which is promising for a car that's over half a century old. However, keep in mind that good is subjective, especially when it comes to classic cars. Under the hood, you've got an 8-cylinder engine, which in 1970 would have been Cadillac's massive 472 cubic inch, 7.7-liter V8. These engines were known for their smooth power delivery and impressive torque. It's paired with an automatic transmission, as you'd expect in a luxury car of this era. The odometer shows 73,000 miles, which isn't bad for a 53-year-old car. However, always take mileage with a grain of salt on vehicles this old. It could have rolled over once or even twice. Now here's where things get a bit tricky. The seller's description is pretty sparse. They simply state that it runs, drives great, which is good to hear, but doesn't give us much detail about the car's condition or history. They've also listed it as a sedan, when the El Dorado was actually a coupe. This could be a simple mistake, or it might indicate that the seller isn't very familiar with the car. Look, I'm not here to oversell this Cadillac. While it's described as being in good condition and running well, the lack of detail in the listing means there could be issues that aren't being disclosed. At $10,000, it's not the cheapest 70 El Dorado out there, but it's also not outrageously priced if it's truly in good condition. This could be a great opportunity for someone looking to get into classic Cadillacs without breaking the bank. The 1970 El Dorado is a stylish, powerful car that represents a high point in American luxury car design. However, given the limited information provided, you'd definitely want to see this car in person, take it for a test drive, and maybe even get a mechanic's opinion before making a decision. So what do you say, Cadillac fans? Are you ready to cruise in this 70 El Dorado? Or would you rather keep searching for a more thoroughly documented example? Remember, always do your due diligence when buying a classic car, especially when the listing is light on details. 20. I've got an interesting find from Craigslist to share with you today. A 1964 Ford Falcon convertible that's currently up for grabs at $6,800. Now, Let me give you the straight scoop on this piece of American automotive history. First off, we're looking at a silver Falcon convertible, which is a pretty cool combination. The seller describes it as being in fair condition, and they're pretty upfront about its needs, which I appreciate. This Falcon has some claim to fame, having appeared in the TV series Loudermilk, so it's got a bit of star power. Under the hood, you've got the 200 cubic inch straight-six engine, paired with a Ford-O-Matic automatic transmission. It's rear-wheel drive, as all proper classics should be. The seller says it runs, drives, stops, which is always good to hear with an older car. Now let's talk about the good and the not so good. This Falcon is described as highly optioned, with features like power steering, a deluxe interior, and bucket seats with a console. The dashboard has been re-chromed, which the seller values at $500 alone. The bumpers and trim are said to be OEM and in great shape. However, it's not all roses. The seller is upfront about some issues. There's rust underneath, which is why the price is on the lower side. It could use a new top, carpet, and driver's seat cover. The odometer shows 12,345 miles, but it's rolled over, so the true mileage is unknown. On the plus side, it comes with some spare parts including fenders, a grille, and taillights. That could be handy for restoration or repairs. Look, I'm not here to oversell this car. It's described as an older restoration that needs some TLC. The seller even suggests it could be used as a donor car or parted out for profit. That tells me it's got some significant needs. At $6,800, you're not getting a show-ready classic. What you are getting is a running, driving Falcon convertible with some cool options and a bit of TV history. It could be a fun project for someone willing to put in the work, or a decent driver as is if you're not bothered by cosmetic imperfections. So what do you say, Ford fans? Are you ready to take on this '64 Falcon project? Or would you rather keep searching for a more pristine example? Remember, always inspect a classic car thoroughly before buying, especially when rust is mentioned.